February 9, 2004, Haverhill, New Hampshire. It was a cold winter night in Haverhill, New Hampshire. 21-year-old Maura Murray crashed her car on a deserted road. A passerby stopped and offered help. Minutes later, police arrived, but Maura was gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle. She vanished into the snowy darkness without a trace. For 20 years, her disappearance remains one of America's most haunting mysteries. Maura Murray, 21, was a promising college student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Originally from Hanson, Massachusetts, she came from a traditional and competitive family and was especially close to her father, Fred Murray. Intelligent and athletic, Maura was studying nursing and dreamed of building a solid career. But in the months leading up to her disappearance, something in her life seemed to be unraveling. Personal problems had begun quietly surfacing in her daily routine. In early February 2004, Maura showed signs of emotional stress. There was an incident at work where she appeared visibly shaken and was comforted by her supervisor for about 20 minutes. The exact cause of her distress was never fully clarified. Just a few days later, she began searching for cabins and remote hotels in New Hampshire. It suggested that Maura was planning to leave, even if only briefly. On February 9th, Maura emailed her professors, explaining that she would need a few days off due to a family emergency. However, her family later stated they were unaware of any such emergency. She made a few phone calls, withdrew cash from an ATM, and purchased supplies at a liquor store. She then set off alone in her black satin sedan, heading north toward New Hampshire. What Maura intended to do remains a mystery to this day. Around 7:30 p.m., her car skidded off a rural road near Haverhill, New Hampshire. Witnesses saw the vehicle lightly struck against a snowbank, but there was no significant visible damage. A local resident, Butch Atwood, spoke with Maura and offered assistance, but she declined, saying she had already called for help. Minutes later, when police arrived, Maura was gone. Her belongings were still inside the vehicle. What began as a simple car accident would soon evolve into one of the most baffling criminal mysteries in the United States. Maura Murray had vanished along a rural road in harsh winter conditions and was never seen again. An investigation was launched that continues to haunt authorities, family members, and true crime enthusiasts to this day. The promising student had simply vanished, and the mystery was only beginning. Authorities in Haverhill began search efforts immediately after Maura's disappearance was confirmed. Search dogs tracked Maura's scent for about 100 yards from the accident scene before losing the trail. This suggested that she may have entered another vehicle or ventured into the woods. Temperatures that night were near freezing, making it unlikely that she had walked very far. Every minute was critical. Helicopters, snowmobile patrols, and search teams scoured the forests and areas surrounding the road. No additional footprints were found in the snow beyond those already identified early on. The lack of immediate physical evidence only deepened investigators' confusion. How could a young woman simply vanish in such an isolated location, leaving so few clues? The case was already showing signs of its complexity from the very beginning. Upon being notified, the Murray family quickly drove to New Hampshire. Fred Murray, Maura's father, became a central figure in the tireless fight for answers. He pressured authorities, gave interviews, and never stopped searching for his daughter. His face became synonymous with the image of a father's persistence in the face of horrific uncertainty. The pain of her absence was visible in every word he spoke. Local media began covering the case with growing intensity. The mystery of the young college student who vanished after a car accident fascinated the public. Soon, national television networks were reporting on Maura's disappearance. But even with widespread media attention, no new leads emerged. It was as if Maura had been swallowed by the very darkness of that frozen road. In the first weeks, various theories began to surface. Suicide, voluntary disappearance, abduction, a fatal accident deep in the woods. Every possibility was considered. But the complete lack of physical evidence made every theory highly speculative. The Haverhill community remained on alert, and volunteers continued sporadic searches. But Maura had simply vanished. As the weeks went by, authorities deepened the investigation in an attempt to find any concrete leads. Local residents were interviewed, including Butch Atwood, the last person known to have spoken with Maura. His account remained consistent. Maura declined his offer of help and said she had already called for roadside assistance. However, phone records showed no calls for assistance at that time. This discrepancy fueled speculation. Analysis of the vehicle revealed no signs of violence or struggle inside the car. The airbag had deployed, but the damage was too minor to suggest serious injuries. Maura's personal belongings, including her cell phone, bank card, and identification, were found inside the vehicle. Only her car keys and phone were missing. The fact that she may have left without a jacket in such cold weather seemed strange to many. Extensive searches of the nearby wooded areas continued for weeks. Dogs, drones, and even thermal sensors were used, but no trace was found. The rugged, snow-covered terrain made search operations even more difficult. Authorities began to consider the possibility that Maura may have entered another vehicle, either voluntarily or by force. But without evidence, everything remained purely speculative. The New Hampshire State Police kept the case open, but over time, the pace of the investigation gradually slowed. The absence of any witnesses after the accident made the investigation increasingly difficult. Fred Murray, frustrated, accused authorities of not conducting wide or aggressive enough search efforts. The relationship between Maura's father and law enforcement grew increasingly tense. Meanwhile, the case began to attract attention beyond traditional media. Internet blogs and true crime forums started following Maura's disappearance intensely. The case became one of the first to take on a life of its own online, with dozens of amateur detectives attempting to solve the mystery. Entire groups emerged, dedicated to theories, map analyses, timelines, and hypotheses about what might have happened. The lack of answers created fertile ground for every kind of speculation. Maura Murray's story was becoming a national obsession. As the investigation deepened, personal aspects of Maura's life began to surface, fueling even more speculation. It was discovered that just days before her trip, she had been involved in minor disciplinary issues at the university. There were also rumors of difficulties in her long-distance relationship with a cadet from a military academy. In addition, her online searches for remote lodging raised the possibility of a planned escape, but none of these leads offered a clear explanation for her disappearance. Fred Murray, however, consistently rejected the idea that Maura had left voluntarily. According to him, his daughter would never abandon her family or academic life without warning. For Fred, Maura's disappearance was clearly the result of foul play. His tireless defense of his daughter became a defining characteristic of his ongoing fight for answers. He would become a permanent voice at the center of the case. Another detail that sparked speculation was the discovery of a mysterious calling card among her belongings. Records showed a few calls made to unknown numbers in the Vermont area near where she disappeared. Were these attempts to contact someone involved, a planned meeting, or simple coincidences with no direct connection? None of these questions were ever definitively answered. The theory that Maura may have fallen victim to an opportunistic predator also gained traction. The Haverhill area was known for its remote nature and sparse nighttime traffic. If someone with criminal intentions crossed her path after the accident, the chances of capturing her would have been high. But again, the absence of direct witnesses prevented this theory from being confirmed. The possibilities remained wide open, further deepening the mystery. Meanwhile, public interest in the case continued to grow. Documentaries, special reports, and podcasts emerged entirely dedicated to Maura Murray's disappearance. The story transcended time, taking on unprecedented proportions within America's true crime media. Even years later, the national obsession for answers only grew stronger, and the family, still grieving, continued their tireless fight for justice. As the years went by, Maura Murray's case became fertile ground for dozens of conflicting theories. One of the most widely debated was the possibility that Maura had staged her own disappearance. Some suggested she may have planned to escape academic pressures, personal problems, or even a potentially abusive relationship. This line of thinking was fueled by her purchase of alcohol and her online searches for remote accommodations. But there was no solid evidence to support this theory. Another recurring theory was that Maura had suffered a fatal accident after leaving the car. Perhaps, disoriented in the snow, she had wandered into the woods and succumbed to hypothermia. However, exhaustive searches using dogs, drones, and thermal detectors found no trace of human remains. Even years later, after snowmelt and vegetation growth, no bones or clothing were ever discovered. This made the theory increasingly unlikely over time. Some independent researchers began to speculate about the involvement of local individuals, including potential abductors. The area was surrounded by remote regions where criminals could act unnoticed with impunity. Several people with questionable pasts lived nearby, but investigations failed to directly connect anyone to the disappearance. With no witnesses, cameras, or signs of a struggle, the investigation remained trapped in the same vicious cycle. The complete silence at the scene continued to be the most baffling aspect of the case. Meanwhile, Fred Murray became increasingly vocal in his criticism of law enforcement's work. In numerous interviews and press conferences, he openly accused police of incompetence and negligence. According to Fred, early failures to properly secure the accident scene permanently damaged the investigation. The tension between the family and the police department became public and intense. Yet despite the conflicts, the case was never officially closed. The internet took on a central role in spreading and debating the case. Entire forums emerged dedicated exclusively to Maura's disappearance. Amateur detectives reanalyzed timelines, cross-referenced public data, and proposed new theories almost weekly. The online community kept the case alive in the public's mind, even as the years passed. Maura Murray became one of the first viral phenomena in the digital true crime world. By the mid-2010s, with the rise of social media and the growing popularity of true crime podcasts, the case regained momentum in the media. Productions like the Missing Maura Murray podcast attracted thousands of listeners who obsessively followed every newly revealed detail. The case was revisited with fresh eyes, and old files were reviewed under growing public pressure. The renewed attention brought new energy to the search. Once again, Maura's name returned to national headlines. Authorities began re-examining properties near the crash site. One particular residence, owned by a local resident, became the focus of online theories and alternative media coverage. Some claimed that cadaver dogs had detected the scent of human remains in the area, but official searches found nothing conclusive. Excavations were even requested by the family and private investigators. Yet all forensic analyses led to dead ends. The FBI and state police reviewed satellite imagery, cell tower records, and detailed maps of the region. New mapping software was used to expand search areas that had not been explored in the initial investigations. Still, no significant discoveries were made. It was as if Maura had vanished into thin air on that cold winter night. the enigma remained impenetrable. Fred Murray never gave up. Year after year, he continued pressuring authorities, giving interviews, and participating in conferences for families of missing persons. His fight became a national symbol of a father's relentless persistence. Even as he aged, Fred continued to lead campaigns to keep his daughter's case alive in public debate. His pain became his strength, and his face a symbol. The ongoing pressure kept the case technically open all these years. Eventually, new genetic genealogy technologies sparked small glimmers of future hope. But for now, the absence of any concrete physical evidence continued to frustrate investigators and family members alike. The case remained trapped within its own mystery. Maura Murray continued to stand as one of the greatest unsolved disappearances in modern America. Nearly 2 decades later, Maura Murray's case had taken on an almost mythical status within the true crime world. She had become not only a missing person, but a symbol of the fragility of investigations into disappearances in remote areas. Experts began using the case as a teaching example in police academies and criminology programs across the country. The frustration over the lack of answers turned her disappearance into a kind of modern legend. Maura's name became synonymous with an unsolved mystery. At public events for missing persons, Fred Murray continued to hold up his sign with his daughter's image. Other victims' families sought him out for strength, guidance, and comfort. He transformed his pain into tireless activism, fighting for improvements in missing person investigations nationwide. Fred dedicated his life to seeking answers, even as time weighed heavily against him. His daughter's absence never deterred him. The online community remained as active as ever. New podcasts, documentaries, and mini-series constantly explored every loose end or potential lead. Even without official progress, the case never stopped generating discussion. The American public continued following every small piece of news with the same fascination and frustration. Few cases have remained alive for so long in the nation's collective consciousness. For the detectives involved from the beginning, the case became one of the greatest challenges of their careers. The lack of tangible evidence made the investigation nearly impossible to solve through traditional methods. All acknowledged that without an unforeseen breakthrough, Maura Murray might remain missing forever. Still, no one was willing to completely give up. Hope, however faint, still lived on. The family's anguish blended with the public responsibility to keep the case alive. Maura had vanished, but she would not be forgotten. The combined efforts of her family, the internet, and the media created a permanent network of vigilance surrounding the case. Even without answers, her absence had transformed into a social force, and the world continued waiting for an ending that never seemed to come. Today, nearly 20 years after her disappearance, Maura Murray remains one of the greatest enigmas in American criminal history. No concrete leads, no physical evidence, and no formal suspects have ever been identified. The road in Haverhill remains virtually unchanged, a silent monument to the mystery that unfolded there. Visited by curious onlookers, amateur investigators, and journalists, it has become a landmark of modern American true crime. The emptiness of that frozen curve still echoes Maura's absence. Fred Murray, now older, remains active in his crusade for answers. His commitment to finding his daughter, or at least understanding what happened, remains unshaken. The pain of not knowing, as he often describes, is a form of constant torture. But his determination continues to inspire other parents and families across the country. He remains tirelessly Maura's greatest advocate. Various theories continue to circulate within online communities, some growing more elaborate and controversial over time. While some attempt to reconstruct logical timelines, others dive into conspiracies and obscure hypotheses. Public fascination remains fueled by the complete absence of definitive answers. It is the total mystery that draws the attention of thousands around the world. Maura Murray has become an eternal name in America's true crime culture. Missing persons organizations still display Maura's face on websites, posters, and at annual events. Age progression images show what she might look like today if she is still alive. Hope, though fragile, has never been fully abandoned. Time may consume many things, but Maura's memory remains intact. And as long as someone continues to ask, what happened to Maura Murray, her story will live on. In every corner of America, Maura Murray's name serves as a brutal reminder of the pain of losing someone without explanation. Her absence is not just personal, it has become national. It symbolizes the desperation of thousands of families living with the anguish of unsolved disappearances. And until the truth comes to light, the Maura Murray case will continue to be told, investigated, and debated. Because there are some stories that time cannot bury. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.